am Andrea of Team 4, and my topics are biology, fields of study, and branches of biology, and how life starts in planet. The number one is fields of study of biology, and I'm gonna explain the 5 best known fields of study. So, the first one is cell biology that focuses on the study of the cell, the cellular. Then we have evolutionary biology that is a discipline in charge of investigating the change that different species have suffered through their history. Number 3 is molecular biology that focus on the molecular structures. Number 4 is biochemistry, that is the science that represents the intersection between biology and chemistry, and it explains the chemical reaction in the biology world. And number 5, we have botany, that is the biology discipline that bases its story on the plant kingdom. Then the second topic I'm going to explain is the branches of biology. And first, we have anatomy that studies the structure and form of living things. Then we have the bacteriology that studies the bacteria, obviously. Then we have marine biology that are the studies of organisms at the sea. And then we have molecular biology that studies, obviously, the moleculars again. And then we have how life starts in the planet. So the experimental research on the origin of life began in 1950s with the work of 2 pioneering scientists in a discipline called prebiotic chemistry, Stanley L. Miller and Jan Otto. Evidence accumulated since then tells us that life probably began around 3.8 billion years ago, just 700 million years after our planet formation. In the great chemistry laboratory that was the primitive, the first organic molecules were synthesized, which were progressively organized to form longer and more complex ones. From them, systems were created that the combination 3 fundamental characteristics: a compartment delimited by a membrane, a basic metabolism which allowed matter and energy to be excited with the environment, and a molecular with genetic information, probably RNA, which will later give place to proteins and DNA. We consider that these primitive cells were the first living beings, since they already have the capacity to cell something and reproduce the same. So basically, there was one cellula, and that cellula reproduced himself. And yes. So this is all for me, and thank you.
Hi, my name is Patricio Rios, and I'm going to explain the characteristics of living things and the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. All living organisms share several key characteristics or functions: order, sensitivity or response to the environment, reproduction, growth and development, regulation, homeostasis, and energy processing. When viewed together, these characteristics serve to define life. What are prokaryotes? According to the morphological point of view, prokaryote cells are the most primitive cells. They do not have a definite nucleus, which includes bacteria and cyanobacteria. The chromatin bodies remain scattered inside the cytoplasms in prokaryotes. Asexual division occurs, basically binary fission. Prokaryotes are smaller than eukaryotes. What are eukaryotes? It is believed that eukaryotes have been evolved from the prokaryotes. They have been characterized by their membrane nucleus. They contain organelles like mitochondria bounded by membranes and are located in the cytoplasms. That is, they contain the definitive nucleus. The chromatin bodies are enclosed by a nuclear membrane. Both sexual and asexual division occurs in eukaryotes. They are larger than prokaryotes and show better structural organization and increased functional efficiency than prokaryotes. And that's it for my part.
Hello, my topic is number 4, and it is about the history of the microscope, the cell, and the cell theory. The oldest magnifying lens took place in the Syrian Empire at the age, I think at the age of 715 before Christ. Zacharias Janson in 50 and 19 is the first of some inventors from the compound microscope. The first person who named it as the microscope was Giovanni Faber in 1625. In 1665, Robert Hooke used it for scientific purposes, and he was who linked the history of microscope with that of the cell. Leeuwenhoek developed a new technique to manufacture lenses that allowed to observe samples with magnification up to 2000 times, and also he published his results in 1684. In the 19th century, it was possible to perfect the microscope, and it became handy tool, especially in the medical field. The cell theory says the postulates of the cellular theory. They affirm that number 1 is all living things are made up of cell. Number 2 says omni cellula et cellula. And in other words, that is, every cell comes from pre-existing one. The number 3 said the cell is the physiological unit of life. The number 4 is the cell contains the hereditary information. And also we can add the 5th postulate. The disease begins in the cell. The history of the cell begins with Robert Hooke, who in 1665 published the observation he made with the microscope that he created. Anton van Leeuwenhoek observed and described in more details cells such as spermatozoa and protozoa. Schwann and Schleiden proposed what later became the first postulate of the cell theory. Robert Brown described the nucleus in 1831. Rudolf Virchow proposed that all cells come from pre-existing cells in 1858. Lynn Margulis proposed the endosymbiotic theory in 1981. And yep, that's it.
Okay, there are different forms of cell transport, but what is cell transportation? Cell transportation is the movement of substances across the cell membrane. It could be into or out of the cell. Sometimes it just happens through the phospholipid bilayer, but it also sometimes might need protein's assistance to cross the cell membrane. There are two different kinds of cell transport we're going to talk about: passive and active transportation. Passive with diffusion and fusylated diffusion. Active with endocytosis and exocytosis. Passive transport does not need energy at all, and it depends on the permeability of the cell membrane, if there is more glucose in or out of the cell. Diffusion, for example, moves with the concentration gradient, where molecules move from high to low concentration. That's why they can move freely. Fusylated diffusion is still diffusion and it still moves with the flow of the concentration gradient.
just that the proteins facilitates things pass across the membrane. The only difference between them is the usage of proteins. Okay? And then active transportation. It goes against concentration gradient, therefore they need energy to happen. Molecules may need ATP energy that can power active transportation. Endocytosis is the fusing of substances with the cell membrane to form vesicles that can be taken inside the cell. Think about endo, like in cells and substances go in. The endocytosis is a general term which can be divided in three kinds depending on how the cell is bringing substances inside. There is phagocytosis, where the membrane stretches out around the substance and finally get in. Receptor-mediated endocytosis is where actually incoming substances need to bind receptors to get in. Pinocytosis allows cells to take in fluids. Exocytosis is a reverse of endocytosis when molecules exit the cell, and it is really important for taking out the cell has made. And then levels of organization. It takes the smallest unit of matter, which is the atom, and joins several atoms and form a molecule, like oxygen, ozone, etc. Then join lots of molecules to form an organelle, lysosomes, nucleus, etc. Attach plenty of organelles to form a cell, a stem or bone cells. For example, lots of cells form a tissue, which it could be epithelial, connective, or nervous tissue, etc. Plenty of tissues form an organ, pancreas, esophagus, etc. Several organs institute an organ system, cardiovascular and nervous system. Organ systems form an organism, a human, a fox, a cat, etc. Organisms lend to a community, tertiary and secondary consumers, for example. Communities lend to ecosystems like the sea, a field, etc. Ecosystems form the biosphere and so on.
Human organ systems. Integumentary system. It encloses and protects the body and is the site of many sensory receptors. Skeletal system. Functions of the skeletal system include supporting the body and giving it shape. Muscular system. It enables movement with skeletal system and helps to maintain body's temperature. Nervous system. The nervous system controls both voluntary and involuntary responses of the human organism, and it also detects and processes sensory information. Endocrine system. The endocrine hormones are chemical messengers that control many body functions, including metabolism, growth, and sexual development. Cardiovascular system. It delivers oxygen and nutrients to tissues and equalizes temperature in the body. Urinary system controls water balance in the body and removes wastes from blood and excretes them. Respiratory system removes carbon dioxide from the body and delivers oxygen to the blood. Lymphatic system returns fluid to blood and defends against pathogens. Digestive system processes the food for use by the body and removes wastes from undigested food. Male reproductive system produces sex hormones in gametes and delivers gamete to female. Female reproductive system produces sex hormones and gametes, supports embryo fetus until birth, and produces milk for infant. Homeostasis. Claude Bernard wrote all the vital mechanisms, varied as they are, have only one object, to preserve constant the internal environment. In 1928, Walter B. Cannon coined the term homeostasis to describe and define the regulation of this internal environment. Each cell will take care of its self-regulation, that is, of maintaining its homeostasis. In the biological context, homeostasis refers to the quality of organisms to preserve their internal conditions despite the changing conditions in its exterior or interior. This prevention of internal conditions is achieved thanks to metabolism. The balance is reached thanks to the mechanisms of self-regulation that every living thing has.
Hi, I'm Diego from Team 4, and I'll be explaining health and diseases, health in adolescence, and healthy lifestyles. Health and diseases. Everything is finally regulated by mechanisms that allow us to maintain homeostasis and therefore health. Therefore, disease is a loss of balance in homeostasis. Factors can work together to affect physical and mental health. A disease can affect your health by affecting the body's organisms or organs or cells. Health in adolescence. Adolescents imply physical, cognitive, and psychosocial changes. It is very important to recognize the health needs of adolescents. We must start from the idea that health is a complete well-being in the human being. The adolescent is not the same as when he was a kid. Now he has different needs. He still needs to play, the affection of his parents, high caloric foods, the security of a home, and someone to cover his needs. Healthy lifestyles. A healthy lifestyle can help you avoiding diseases and extend lifetime. Lastly, here are some recommendations that will lead you to a healthy lifestyle. Healthy diet. Eat healthy foods like vegetables, fruits, nuts, and healthy fats. Physical activity. It is recommended to do physical activity at least 30 minutes per day. Rest. Sleep at least 7 or 8 hours a day.